So that's a helpful point. Like knowing your numbers helps make celebrating the activity more realistic. Otherwise, because it is how you get to those numbers. Otherwise, you are kind of playing a weird lying to yourself game. The next point that's really key that is worth thinking about is, and I think we were just talking about this with Isaiah, who's now on the call yesterday, how if you're doing the activity, like you're role playing 45 minutes every morning, that's awesome if you're doing that. Like that's great, but you will get better if you role play for 30 minutes and have 15 minutes of reflection on what you can improve in that process at the end of it. That's actually the crazy hack is not just actually the thing, but because we want to celebrate our activity, but you get the real process of like, oh, celebrating that gets me even better results instead of like celebrating the results is having some type of scheduled mechanism for reflection that results in improvement on your numbers while you're celebrating the activity. So like you guys reviewing that call, having that time going through that stuff, having some way to be like, oh, I got a little bit better about this thing in the process. It's not actually whether I closed or not, but like I actually did a good job in establishing rules. I had that checklist. I checked everything off. I did it. Like that is also part of, because it's celebrating the activity, but it's really celebrating the process. And the activity is just it's the reps of the process. Like the process is going to the gym and the activity is the reps. But getting better is like, because I did enough of the reps, I can put on extra weights now. And I'm still doing the same amount of reps, but the weights are stronger now, so I'm getting stronger. It's like, that's kind of the thing about having scheduled time to reflect and improve on your actual results. So it helps to know your numbers and have some type of mathematical equivalent of being like, all right, I made 20 calls. If it takes this many calls to get an appointment, this many appointments to get a deal, and it makes this much per deal, I made this much money. If I had a counter directly to my bank account and just every time I had to make a dial, it went up $2. Like that's not, you can't live off $2, but if you literally like dial, no one answered, bank account went up $2. Like it would be like, oh my God, this is the best gig in the world. All I got to do is dial my phone. I make $2. And that is honestly, if you reverse engineer enough, that's how sales works. Like it's this much activity to get this type of results, which gets this much pay. Then I can start doing division and get like, hey, knowing our numbers now, this is how much we just like theoretically just made. This is how we get to those bigger deals. It's not like, oh, we didn't make anything for a week. Oh my God, we made 200 grand one month. It's like, no, you did the whole activity the whole time. And that's what led to that week of 200 grand was that activity that you did the week before, as well as the week that it worked. And so that helps there. And then that scheduled improvement to improve the process of being like, all right, if if my day usually ends at 5, all right, like tomorrow it ends at 5. Like now new change ends at 5:30, and it's just 30 minutes just reflecting on how can I get 1% better the next day. What could I have done in the process that was a little bit off? What could I have done to improve? And it doesn't have to be crazy. It just has to be a tiny little thing, and because it has to be something I can do the next day. So this is a big hack for me, is that instead of setting these like lofty 10x goals that make all the social media thing, my thing was like, oh, I'm not trying to 10x. I'm trying to 0.1%. I just want to get 1% better. But rather than 10x in 10 years, it's 1% better every day. Or even 100. If I was struggling to be 100% better in a year, that's a hard goal. But 1% better at a thing the next day that I can actually measure on a day-to-day basis is much more manageable. And if I'm only better it only works half the time, maybe 1% better the next day, over a year, it's a lot more than 100%, right? And so you actually get better results. And so what it helps then also is if you fall short of a goal, I didn't fall short of an annual goal or a decade-long goal. It was just something I can iterate on. And literally the next time I fall asleep and wake up, I get to review these goals. So it's just like the ultimate hack to just reverse back to your lofty goals. So like, what do I have to do on a daily basis? And then setting scheduled time to reflect on, did I actually do that? And can I be honest with myself? That's a real thing. It's really hard to be honest with yourselves about what didn't work. But if you can remind yourself like, hey, this is a results-based business. I'm not paid for showing up. I'm paid for actually giving real results, for having a better conversation, for being uncomfortable in a home or on the phone, for going for the close even after they told me to pound sand the second they answered the phone. That is like really where that is where the money is. And so reminding myself, I need to be objective with myself. I have to be honest, like, where did I really fall short? Did I say too many times? That's not a massive change, That's a 1% change. Put that down. I said too many times. I don't even hear myself say it, but I said it in the silence. And I don't want to do that because it's unnecessary filler for this process. Let me try and, if I review my call, if I said it 20 times last time, I only have to say it, as long as I said it 18 times the next call rather than 20 at the same length of time, that's a win. After that, 17, 15, whatever. That's manageable, and I get to celebrate that. That is what leads to these like incredibly compounded results. Where also the sort of bulletproof nature of this is when you fail, you only messed up one day. You weren't derailed this crazy amount. One day failure is nothing. I can hop back on the next day. And oftentimes the failure of that one day, if you're honest about where you failed, the next day is not 1% better. It's like 6% better. Because if you were actually honest about where you fell short, the adjustments on that change actually caused a little boost. So that was for me where I was like, because the situation I talked about of focusing on my activity was, to give a little more context, I was selling solar in Illinois in February, which is so hard. And I saw the same expectations for the company as, a 31-day month. And they had the same expectations whether it was Southern California or Illinois. And it sucks in February because it's very hard. First off, there's not that many people, we can't install that many homes because we can't even get on roofs for inspection because of Illinois state law on certain angles when the temperatures are below a certain amount for safety for the workers. The insurance is too high to have them on the roof. So I can't actually sell it. So that happened. I was like, oh, it's all frustrated, like blaming circumstances. Like, this is unfair. How can they want this? And I was going to be written up in a performance improvement plan. It looked like it if I didn't hit numbers this month. I was like, this is the worst thing ever. How could I rectify my identity as someone who loves sales, who's always trying to improve, and I need a performance improvement plan? And my manager just told me, hey, with your current closing ratio, if you just go into 2 homes a day, you'll hit numbers just in time. And I went, okay, so that's all I have. That's all I have to do. I will celebrate going into 2 homes a day as if it was a sale rather than celebrating the sale. It was just that. And I crushed February. I only needed 8 sales. That's what I needed to not get it. And I had like 13. And then I just crushed it afterwards. Like, this is insane. As soon as I started just focusing on what I had to do, I had my first ever back-to-back twofers. That's 2 sales in a day, 2 days in a row. I was like, that just kept happening. And then literally in March, I just started averaging 17 sales a month. And it was just because I was always in a good mood. I was always, never was pushy, never had commission breath, because it was very easy to get into 2 homes in terms of that setup, because also I was getting more sales and then they set more appointments, and that was the ultimate thing. It was like wanting to blame outside circumstances. And a key point also in getting to that is not simply celebrating the results, it's being honest with what I was falling short at. Like, where was this not working? I started to listen to a call. I did not want to blame February and the company for being unrealistic for having the same standards. Because that was outside of my control. And the whole point of just trying to improve was what can I actually control? And that I can control was I can't even control what happens on a weekly basis, but I have such a good chance of controlling what I do on a day-to-day basis. And so I started if I was reviewing what fell short, I wanted it to be my fault because I was like, that's what I can control. That was the whole thing. And so that is the ultimate hack to finding ways to improve, wanting it to be your fault, because in your mind, that's the only thing you have control over anyway, is what you actually can control. That if I didn't find it being my fault, if I was like, oh, it wasn't, it was actually kind of a bummer because I decided that was out of my control. I was like, oh, it was a credit fail. And that's why they wanted to do it, but they didn't have the credit, which has nothing to do. The company just counts that as if they said, no, you're not good at this. They didn't care that they ran credit. It didn't affect my numbers. They counted as a failed sale. And instead of woe is me about that, I wanted it to be my fault for not finding some way to determine about the credit otherwise, or leaving it with some way to fix their credit and come back at a different time. I never wanted it to be not my fault because I was out of my control. I stopped worrying about that. And so that is if you can actually execute on that approach, it's where the super surgeon, LA surgeon money is in this role of just basically feeling you were doing exactly what you were doing before, but now you're paid like you're a celebrity doctor, because you're being genuinely accountable to what's falling short and always trying to iterate and improve just a little bit every day.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know about anybody else, but that's probably the number one thing that I could change. That's immediate. I could start my calls today. And I really want to commit to that, and it's been the last few months have been especially tough for us, just for whatever reason. At the end of the day, like you said, it's probably my fault. At least if it's not 100%, it's damn near 100%.